We're skipping forward an entire year from the events that just took place. A year. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. We just have a few questions that need to be answered. Those of us who watched the first season recall that a riot on planet Ferrix resulted in a massive Imperial crackdown on the planet. So, a direct attack on Imperial soldiers by rebel forces in a stolen jet will get what sort of reaction? Surely there will be a reaction. Right?
No.
What?
Oh, the misery. Imagine, for a second, if somebody from the FBI's most wanted list shoots up a military base, steals a jet, flies it to the other end of the country, and bombs a military convoy. How do you suppose the US military would respond? Really, any world government. Think about it. I'm not going to bother naming hypotheticals here because I've already told you it's not going to get mentioned. The story and the world in which it is set don't even acknowledge that these things happened. Now, I had this little spiel about how Act 2 is the good part of the series and that these episodes are alright. What do we got? I have markedly less to say about Act 2 as there's less to criticize. It's not insulting or catastrophically broken. This is where Andor Season 2 gets good. The first 3 were just studio interference. None of that's true. Not really. Even if it's not as bad as Act 1, it's still not very good and does not deserve a defensive preamble. So let's start here. Dedra dispatches Syril to pose as an Imperial defector on planet Ghorman. He will feed information to the Ghorman front, and this will create the radical insurgency that they need. The Ghorman rebels they can depend on to do the wrong thing. Now, Syril is able to effectively pose as an Imperial defector because he has what might be considered legitimate grievances with the Empire. This plan only works because he has these grievances and yet remains loyal to the Empire despite those grievances.
Keep this in mind because it's going to be very relevant indeed.
Syril contacts Dedra and informs her that he's being watched by the Ghorman front. They're spying on him, tapping his comms, following him, and have even broken into his apartment. It has to be them, he says. Who else could it be? Now, this is a not very subtle way of communicating to the audience that it might not actually be them, that there is someone else that may be following him. This isn't a line that bothered me at first, but upon rewatching, it feels a little amateur here. And I would imagine that this is intended to be critical setup for later payoff, so I think that it could have used a little more tooling around so that it doesn't sound so meta. Now, of course, we learn before long that Dedra actually has had an ISB agent tailing Syril to make sure that he isn't being followed by the Ghormans or the broader rebel forces. But Syril is, of course, indeed being watched, followed, and bugged by the Ghorman front. They know who he is, and that he may be willing to defect. Syril works in an office in the main plaza of planet Ghorman, which I call the main plaza because almost every scene on this planet takes place in this same plaza. While he's walking through this one plaza, he's approached by an agent of the Ghorman front, in the same plaza with the Imperial Armory in it, right under the nose of the Empire, and invites Syril to join a perfectly legitimate town hall meeting, which for some reason required a secret invitation. You following this? This town hall is where we're introduced to the least important quote-unquote character, Phil Burnell, who explains that the Ghormans did nothing wrong, they did everything correct, and yet the Empire has shut down their data lanes and are causing online lag. Pay very close attention to this character, because he is a waste of space. After the meeting, Syril successfully establishes a connection with the Ghorman front and sets in motion the plan to selectively feed intel to them. A day or so later, he meets with Ghorman Spider-Man in the plaza, because this entire planet is just this plaza, and passes the intel to him. Syril acts nervous, but Spider-Guy says, "It's okay, there's nobody watching." Which, there's absolutely no way for him to know that. There could be any number of people watching from any number of hotel rooms or offices here. Hell, there could even be 2 or 3 snipers in this plaza and nobody would be the wiser. In a scene of dubious value, the ISB storm into Syril's building and turn the place upside down looking for listening devices, fearing that the Ghormans may have bugged the place, which of course they have. They find a bug in Syril's office, and he gives this big performance about how outraged he is that the ISB would raid his office like this. Now, I think that the pretty clear implication here is that this was a staged raid that Syril was in on, and that he's just playing the part of an outraged bureaucrat to gain the trust of the Ghormans, which is exactly what happens. The scene immediately following this one shows the Ghormans reading his file and becoming fully convinced that he's a real defector. I don't believe for a second that this was an unplanned ISB raid that Syril was unaware of, or that he is legitimately outraged or aggrieved here. If that were the case, surely he might have mentioned it to Dedra. Hey, this is an outrage. I'm doing my job perfectly fine, and some other ISB squad are sabotaging this operation. They removed that bug that we wanted here for whatever exactly our plan is, and they're ruining it. Because surely, if this weren't an intentional ploy by Syril and Dedra, she'd need to know that. There was plenty of intradepartmental rivalry and tension in Season 1, but there's nothing to suggest that's what's happening here. So as it stands, this was very clearly a staged raid and a staged reaction, Syril having played the part well and convinced the Ghormans that he's on their side. There is no particular reason that we may want to keep an eye out for potential grievances that Syril could be forming with the Empire or ISB. With the job well done, Syril heads back home to Coruscant and reunites with Dedra, who for seemingly no reason, informs him that she's had somebody tailing him. He seems offended by this, that she seemingly distrusts his abilities, or that she's doing this without at least informing him, which is somewhat fair. I don't know why she would bother telling him this, or at least without explaining why she did it, unless the writer had some arbitrary reason to make Syril dislike or distrust Dedra. I don't know why she would just drop some information that would reasonably lead him to dislike or distrust her, and say it in such a way that would naturally lead him to dislike or distrust her. It's kind of weird. It almost feels like placeholder dialogue, almost. That's meant to, set up a major payoff later, and which should have, and would have, been rewritten and improved upon with a redraft. Which fans of this season have been sure to tell me was not an option, and that's why the show is good. But as we have it, Dedra just says this, to spite herself seemingly, which I always like, which is increasingly strange, because having somebody tail your undercover asset after they've expressed that enemy forces are stalking them and breaking into their apartment is not just an okay thing to do, but is practically mandatory. You'd actually be shirking your responsibilities if you didn't have somebody tailing him to make sure that he's safe. But of course, nobody has this conversation. So Syril is offended, even though he really shouldn't be, all because Dedra said something she really shouldn't have, all because she didn't say the things that she really should have said. I like that we're laying the groundwork for some distrust here, but this is not great. So Dedra changes the subject by telling him to put on his business socks and turn out the lights, again hinting that their relationship may be strictly transactional to her. It's not business time because she likes him and wants to be with him, perhaps, but instead, it's sexy time strictly because she wants to keep him wrapped around her finger. Now there's something there, there's something to that. It's a much better way to instill some tension between these two, because there is still some ambiguity. I have trouble believing that she could be this incompetent at her job, but I can fully believe that she doesn't know how to more convincingly seduce him, whether it's genuine or not. Elsewhere in the galaxy, Andor and Bix are... well, actually, no. Also here on Coruscant, Andor and Bix are laying low in Luthen's premier safe house, living out the lives of a happily married couple, complete with increasingly severe night terrors. Now Bix, unable to sleep, has taken to using illicit street drugs to help cope with these night terrors. Well, that's huge. Drug abuse, drug addiction? That's a big deal, and this is bound to have massive consequences in the coming episodes. You can go to the next slide. Now, the show never refers to these drugs by any name, so I'm just going to call them death sticks, because they look somewhat similar, being a liquid substance in a tube. So when Luthen stops by the safe house later to offer Bix a job, he finds the death sticks on the counter and reconsiders, realizing that she's not in a healthy condition. He slips them into his pocket, but Bix catches him and demands their return, saying, "Give it." You know, the thing that toddlers say, like literal babies, when somebody takes away their toy because they don't know any better because they're toddlers. Give it. I guess you fucking flunked out of kindergarten. This was written by an adult for an adult character to be recited by an adult actress in the most mature Star Wars content ever made. And I guess nobody was bothered by the line, "Give it." Okay, sure. Now, despite Luthen telling her that this isn't safe or a healthy solution to her problems, and in fact will only make things worse long term, she continues using on through the next episode. It's not clear whether Andor is aware that she's doing this. He is definitely around her while she's strung out, but whether he knows that she's high or just believes that she's sleep deprived, we don't really know. But we also don't know, and people don't like asking this question, Where is she getting the drugs? Is she going out at night to meet with her dealer? Is Andor the one buying the stuff? Is Andor supplying drugs to his mentally disturbed girlfriend? There are serious questions to ask either way, but the show doesn't want you asking any of them. Indeed, the show doesn't actually even want to explore this topic. This is the one and only conversation about drug use or addiction that happens in this show. The only one. We see Bix get lit one or two more times after this, and then it's never mentioned again. To say we skip straight to a resolution isn't even true, because there is no resolution. It just stops being a thing off screen. And I think that's a real shame. There is something compelling about watching a character get beaten down like this, relentlessly, until she hits rock bottom and resorts to sedating herself. And I'm engaged. I was here for it. Unfortunately, Tony Gilroy wasn't. He was too busy with this, and this, and this. But yes, Bix is still being haunted by visions of the Imperial Doctor who tortured her, and is also seemingly reliving the events of some mission gone wrong. I touched on this briefly earlier, but Bix says that she can't get him out of her head. The soldier from the mission. You know the one, right? No? She feels like Luthen needs to be told about it. About the soldier. The one that Andor killed. You know the one. Andor insists he was a threat. He was an Imperial soldier. Of course I killed him. We're at war. Not everyone knows it yet, but it's happening. We are at war. People die. And she responds, I wonder if he knew we're at war. And Andor replies, he does now. And continues to reiterate that he did nothing wrong, though she doesn't seem convinced. If there were some mission that they went on, these two, that was so critically important to these characters that it had a lasting impact on their lives and mental state, I kind of would have liked to have seen that. Maybe instead of some of this. But I mean, what even are priorities, you know? So they argue about a thing that we don't get to see, that ultimately doesn't matter, because they later have another... before they later have another disagreement about whether Bix should be freed up to go on missions for Luthen. Which I'm just gonna say, no? If you're so twisted up about the one soldier getting killed, why the hell should you be sent on more missions? But Andor is approached by Luthen and reluctantly takes a mission himself, which will send him off-world for a few days, leaving Bix alone to drop acid and watch the Star Wars Holiday Special, thereby increasing her mental trauma almost overnight. His assignment is to head to planet Ghorman, and Andor says, "Ah, yes, I've heard of it." And Luthen says, "Good, it's neither obscure nor without political power." And then he sits Andor down to watch an infomercial about the planet he already knows about. He's given a false identity and a cover story, and will pose as a fashion designer there to tour the Ghorman Spider's desert mining facilities, while he tries to determine if the Ghorman Front are ready for a real rebellion. Now, I have heard the criticism that this sort of James Bond shit is not really a great fit for Andor as a character. A heist, robbing an armory, sure, but undercover work with a fake persona and life story? And this is one criticism that I did not agree with. At least until I remembered that Andor is one of the most wanted men in the galaxy. They know who he is and what he looks like. Andor is, again, the worst possible option for this particular job. A job he'll ultimately fail, for an unrelated reason. Luthen could have, and really should have, just sent Vel to do this job, which he will do in the next episode anyway. But hey, at least Luthen doesn't know that Dedra is working Ghorman. You know, Dedra Miro, the infamous ISB agent who specifically knows Andor by name and is actively hunting for him. Oh, wait, he was actually told this directly in the last episode, and then and then decided to send his one agent to the one planet where the one person most likely to spot him is most likely to spot him.
Great job.
And fact check false. It actually wasn't last episode. It was the same. It was less than 10 minutes ago in this same episode. Look at this. What do 40, and fuck, here we are 32. Turns out I'm giving the show too much credit. Imagine that. Andor is given the password, "I have friends everywhere," which he can use to covertly signal to other operatives that he is working for Luthen. So he takes this to his contact and goes, "I have friends everywhere?"
I have friends everywhere.
Like, he has no idea what a password is, or what he's supposed to do with one, or how to act natural. which does sort of highlight why this James Bond mission is not one that he's very well suited for.
Great job.
But just after Syril's left his office in the Ghorman Plaza, Andor arrives and checks into his hotel in the Ghorman Plaza, because this entire planet is just this plaza. He meets Hotelman, who explains that this very plaza was the site of a horrific massacre that happened 16 years ago, when Moff Tarkin personally ran over 500 civilians in a tank. This is ubiquitously important to the Ghorman people. Later that day, Andor leaves the hotel in the plaza and visits a restaurant elsewhere in the same plaza, where he crosses paths with the daughter of the leader of the Ghorman Front, because this entire planet is just this one plaza. He's not happy that she decided to approach him here and lets her know it. It's nice to see him shit-talk these dumbass Ghormans because they suck in every way, and he goes back to Luthen to tell him as much. He explains that after touring their operations, he's convinced that they're not ready for a fight, that there's no feasible way that they'd get away with the attack they're planning. Luthen says that's fine, and in fact, it's exactly what they need. If the Ghormans are massacred, this will only stir up greater rebellious sentiment across the galaxy. Andor, shocked and appalled by this, storms off. Season 2 of Andor has two distinct modes that it likes to operate in. The first is unfunny comedy mode, and the second is the same thing Season 1 did, but not as good. Now, as good as this scene might be, this clash of two well-defined characters, it really is just a rehash of this scene from Season 1, in which Mon Mothma confronts Luthen about the Aldhani heist because she's worried that it'll just launch an authoritarian crackdown from the Empire and people will get hurt. Luthen says that's exactly what they need and was the plan from the start. If more people are oppressed, this will only stir up more rebellious sentiment across the galaxy, and Mon Mothma is appalled by this. So this is consistent, and that's good, but it is just a retread of what worked in Season 1. And this scene ultimately will make the season worse overall, because it will not remain consistent with future episodes. Speaking of consistency, we have this pretty useless subplot about Luthen and Kleya discovering that a listening device they planted in a noble's antique gallery is going to be discovered. This prompts them to attend a party at his manor and attempt to covertly remove the bug from the antique with the help of Luthen's ISB mole, Lonnie, who is, by chance, also at this party. There's a lot of will they, won't they, but they pull it off because of course they do, and this subplot has no consequence. At least, not in the coming episodes. Back in Season 1, Luthen would wear his wig while working at the gallery, posing as a simple antique dealer, and then remove his wig while he's out performing missions, including when he meets with Lonnie. Now there's a sort of suspension of disbelief that goes into a disguise like this in a fictional story. I can accept that a character putting on glasses or a wig will fool people, because the logistics of the disguise aren't quite as important as the effects of the disguise in the story. And I, as the viewer, accept and believe that it works on the people who he wears the disguise in front of. But when the same character interacts with the same Luthen, both in and out of disguise, and knows who he is in either case, this just makes Luthen look really stupid, and strains that suspension of disbelief. This is really not a good disguise, and now it appears that it doesn't actually work, and Luthen's a moron for thinking that it would, unless he doesn't think that it does, in which case why does he use it? These are questions that didn't need to be asked until now, and you really shouldn't have put this character in this position where I would need to. This retroactively damages Season 1. Because Lonnie just knows he's Luthen, the antique guy. He even knows who fucking Kleya is. How and why? But these characters aren't supposed to be, like, good at covert operations or anything. Check out this scene, where they're walking out of the party, waving the listening device around in the air, openly celebrating their successful heist while they stroll past other groups of listening ears. Are you kidding me?
We have rules for a reason. You don't seem to understand that.
You should have killed Krennic while we were up there.
That's the spirit. Everything you're doing right now is wrong.
Andor learns that Luthen visited Bix while he was out of town and finds this inappropriate. So he goes to Luthen's gallery to confront him. But of course, Luthen reminds him that it's really dangerous to talk openly about their operations, even in their own gallery.
You realize what you're putting at risk right now? Violating every protocol we live by?
Buddy, you abandoned your Season 1 principles a long time ago. I don't want to hear you lecturing fucking Andor about the rules after the shit you've pulled. And what, are you worried that the ISB might be watching the place and maybe recognize Andor? Maybe you should send him off to the Ghorman Plaza, where the ISB are watching the place and will recognize Andor. So Andor tells Luthen that he's out of character and that he's through working for him. He'll take the fight to the Empire himself, and his first target is Dr. Gorst. Now Dr. Gorst is the mad scientist who tortured Bix, and he's currently here on Coruscant. So one night, when he visits his office at night for some reason, Bix leaps from the shadows and attacks, strapping him down and placing the torture device on his head. She strolls toward the exit, where she's confronted by a single security guard, who just stands there and watches while she slowly pulls her gun out and shoots him dead. I'm not sure whether this was meant to be comedic, with the funny flop that he does, but at least we know that valiant music plays. Outside, she reunites with Andor, and they press the button, blowing up the building while cool guys don't look at explosions. On a superficial level, I like that Bix got her revenge. I don't like that this was introduced and then completed in a single scene, or that this single scene is never acknowledged or even referenced again. Dr. Gorst is in a Navy building. The show takes time to highlight that the ISB, the spy agency, are supposed to be protecting him in conjunction with military intelligence, no less, earlier in this same episode. And the cracked-out girlfriend of the most wanted man in the galaxy is able to just stroll in, undetected, into a naval base under the protection of a spy agency and nuke the place. But backing up, after Andor had finished his meeting with the leader of the Ghorman Front in his family's fabric shop in the plaza, because this entire planet is just one plaza, Syril arrives back on Planet Plaza to continue his plot. And since Andor's gone rogue, Luthen has sent Vel and Cinta down to meet with the Ghormans to encourage them to go ahead with their attack on the Empire using Syril's intel. Vel and Cinta are two of Luthen's best operatives, who led the Aldhani heist together back in Season 1. They were romantically involved through much of the season, but broke up toward the end of the season because Vel valued the relationship over the rebellion, and Cinta valued the rebellion over their relationship. A pretty compelling clash of principles, if you ask me. This is the first time Vel and Cinta have reunited since their breakup, and they have some time now to work through what happened. They grab brunch at a local restaurant in the plaza, because there are no other restaurants, because this entire planet is just this stupid plaza. But they're leading the Ghorman operation, because the Ghormans are completely inept, and Vel stresses that they are not to bring guns on this job. They're attacking an unmanned shipment, and the Ghormans are to remain unarmed. On the night of the operation, Syril watches from a nearby rooftop with a direct line to Dedra and Parthenax, informing them that everything is going according to plan. But suddenly, DSP shows up here, on this street, in the middle of the heist. It really is just an incredibly small world, and he demands to know why he wasn't invited to this subplot. It's unclear why this results in a physical altercation, but he just starts wrestling this guy in the middle of the road in order to facilitate drama. While he's doing a few Hogan pulls, the guy grabs his blaster that he's not meant to have, and then accidentally discharges it in a random direction. And that random direction happens to be a named character who he one-shots.
You are not allowed to bring him to the hospital. No, you get no permission to fucking do it.
If you liked Cinta as a character, just fuck you. Go take a seat next to the Brasso fans, you fucking dweebs. What a way to go out. Out like a sucker indeed. So yeah, Cinta's dead. And Syril hops on the radio to go, "Shots fired, shots fired! The Ghormans just shot and killed some lady with a life and a wife and a story that the audience will never get to see. This literally couldn't have gone better for the ISB, as Partagas, who's that?
I am Parthenax.
This literally couldn't have gone better for the ISB, as Parthenax calls for the authorities to come in, and come in loud. So as Vel and the Ghormans and Cinta's corpse escape the crime scene, Vel is now face to face with the dumb fuck who just murdered her girlfriend right in front of her. Now by all rights, she should chew him out for bringing a blaster on the mission, which she directly told him not to do, but I think the writers are actually showing some restraint here by not having her restate the obvious. Everybody involved here already knows how much he fucked up. I think she should just fucking execute him on the spot, but that's just me. What she does instead is, yes, rip into him, but tell him as well that he'll spend his entire life trying to make up for this, using this tragedy, weaponizing his guilt to inspire him to become a greater rebellion fighter. This is, honestly, exactly how I imagined Cinta would want her death used, to carry on the fight, to forward the cause. It's one of the better moments of Season 2. At least if you take it entirely out of the context of an important character dying off-screen to an accidental discharge because everyone on Ghorman is a fucking idiot. Meanwhile, Luthen has sent Will, one of Andor's old buddies from Ferrix, off to help out Saul Guerrera on one of his jobs. Of course, his name isn't Saul Guerrera like I thought it was, like S-O-L, Soul, or S-U-L. It's actually Saul Guerrera. Like saw. You know what a saw is? Like a seesaw?
When was your last contact with Saul Guerrera?
Saul Guerrera.
Saul Guerrera.
Saul.
So Saul Guerrera is building a bomb, and he needs a bomb technician, and Will is that guy. But once he's arrived, Saul with an L won't let him leave. He keeps him here against his will, and forces him to continue working on his bomb because he's not convinced that his current technician is any good. It's nice to have a few scenes with Saul Guerrera again, showing us just how unhinged and zealous he is in his cause against the Empire. Especially when he shoots and kills his own bomb tech because he's replaced him with Will. So Will continues working on Saul's bomb while he monologues madly, ranting and raving about the horrors he's endured at the Empire's hands, his cause of liberty, and his love for the destructive power of explosives. Without a gas mask, he's freely breathing noxious fumes and urges Will to take his own mask off. "You're not with Luthen, you're right here, and you're ready to fight," he says. Inspired, Will takes off his mask, coughing and sputtering as he breathes in the fumes, symbolizing his allegiance to Saul's cause.
Let it in! Let it run! Let it run wide!
So this is where I lost my shit. This is crazy. Watch this. Yavin 4. Yavin 4! The Yavin Rebel base. We just skipped forward a year, and the Rebel army coalesced off screen and have a formal military base now. And Andor's here, and Bix, and Will's here too. He's not working for Saul Guerrera? And he's working for Luthen? What? What was the point of all that? If you were just going to backtrack on it immediately. That was all for nothing. His big noxious pledge of allegiance meant nothing. If you were invested in that, go fuck yourself. If you liked Saul Guerrera, go fuck yourself twice. He's gonna make a brief cameo in episode 12, but that's it, he's gone. This is incoherent fucking nonsense. Character motivations and allegiances can just flip and flop off screen at any given moment, but especially during these massive time skips. And look, the TIE Fighter attack was one thing, but how about the naval building? The building in the capital that Andor blew up? I'm sure that will get some mention in this act, right? In Act 3? No? I'm sure that it had some tangible impact on the world, the galaxy. Yeah? No? Again, imagine for a second what would happen if a federal building were blown up in Washington, D.C. Can you imagine, not national, the global lockdown that would ensue? The worldwide effort to bring the perpetrators to justice. But you blew up a Navy building, a military facility with doctors inside, a fucking military hospital as far as we can tell, and it's crickets. A payroll heist sparks a constitutional amendment, and a terror attack in the capital city can't get so much as a mention. Holy shit!
Oh man, you are getting me so angry.
And here's Bix, clean as she's ever been, crystal fucking clear. No mention, no reference, no lasting effects or consequences of her drug addiction. She's cured. I guess, maybe, and I am 100% writing for the writers here, but I guess that now that she got her revenge, now that she killed Dr. Gorst, she can finally sleep easy again, so she doesn't need the drugs. Because that's how trauma works. That's how PTSD works. That's how chemical dependency works. I wish I knew that. Do you know how many times my dad went to rehab? Turns out all he had to do was blow up a hospital. Act 2 meant nothing. I really thought that I'd spend most of my time praising it, but damn, is it a mess too. If I have ever said that these were the good episodes of Season 2, I renounce that claim. I was wrong. It does practically nothing to touch on the events of the act that came before it, and very little to set up the events of the act that follows. What looks or feels like setup is just filler, from Will to Bix to Luthen to Syril?